After the hottest June on record, the weather looks a little bit more typical for summer as we head into the first week of July. Let's take a look at what's going on high up in the atmosphere with the jet stream. We've got this big dip in it at the moment, this trough, and that's taking low pressure systems up between the UK and Iceland. But we are going to see a shift in the weather patterns high up in the sky. The jet is reorientating itself, coming in more as a direct hit across the UK as we head through the weekend and into next week. This is a more zonal flow, as we like to call it. It means the winds high up in the atmosphere are coming in from the west, and it also means the winds lower down are likely to be coming in from the west and from the Atlantic. Now, one of the big question marks in the next week or so is how this area of low pressure interacts just to the north of Scotland, and that will be determined by what happens over the next day or so as the jet stream strengthens coming out from eastern parts of Canada, and as it picks up this area of low pressure and how that in particular during Thursday and Friday interacts with this current area of low pressure across Iceland, and whether that current one kind of slows this one down. And that's the big question mark really through the weekend. The model's not completely agreeing about the position and exact track of this low. It's likely to bring some wet and windy weather to western parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, it'll just reintroduce the fresher conditions for most of us into the weekend. But as I said, a bit of uncertainty about the exact position of that low pressure. However, in the grand scheme of things, it won't make a big difference to most of us. What it does mean, though, is around that low pressure system, the winds are going to be coming in from the west or the northwest through Saturday and Sunday. So as I said, winds high up in the sky coming in from the west, but also the winds low down. And the winds coming in from the Atlantic means that temperatures are going to be pretty close to average. We're not seeing any heat from the south, and we're not seeing anything cold from the north. Now, sea surface temperatures, as has been previously discussed, are well above average to the west of the UK at the moment, so it's unlikely to get chilly. But as I said, temperatures are going to be fairly close to the average for the last couple of days of June and the first couple of days of July. So that means high teens across the north, further south getting into the low 20s, perhaps the mid-20s if we see any decent spells of sunshine. But with, as I say, westerly winds, temperatures are never going to be too far away from average. Gusty winds, though, across parts of western Scotland will be a feature of the weather during the course of the weekend. And although temperatures by day will be around average, the nighttime temperatures will continue to fluctuate. And that's because as this low pressure arrives, just like we've seen recently, tucked in ahead of this cold front, there will be some warmer air. And then that cold front will push away the humidity as we head into the weekend. So the nights will once again become fresher, but only after we've had quite a warm night on Friday night, because ahead of that cold front, we will see some warm and humid air coming in once more before that gets swept away during the course of Saturday morning. So yes, nighttime temperatures a little bit more fluctuating, but the daytime temperatures will be, as I said, close to average after what has been a very warm June. So the weekends, broadly speaking, bright and breezy. There will be some showers around, but large parts of the country likely to be dry. The main exception to that will be close to that area of low pressure where it will be wet and windy. Nothing exceptional with the winds, but reasonably unusual for the time of year, with particularly blustery conditions in northwest Scotland, depending, of course, on the exact position of this low. Now, this is where our computer model has it, the Met Office one, comes Sunday, just trying to pull away from the Northern Isles. But the European model in particular has it held back a little bit more. And as we've seen, that is really dependent on the interaction of the jet stream and that current area of low pressure sitting across Iceland. So when we look at one computer model, it's not necessarily all that useful. What we do, if you've been following the 10-day trends, you know we look at the same computer model but run many times. We call that an ensemble forecast, and from that we can generate these pretty pictures. These are called Dalmatian plots, which show the location of a given area of low pressure or high pressure for each of the ensemble runs of a computer model. And this is showing us that there's quite a bit of uncertainty. This is the European model, and I'm showing you actually 3 days worth here. This is Saturday, or into Saturday, Saturday night into Friday night into Saturday. This is Saturday night into Sunday, and this is Sunday night and into Monday. But if we just focus on this Sunday one for a start, you can see that the lines here, the pressure patterns from the deterministic, the main computer model run, but each of these little blue dots is a position of that low when you run the model many, many times. And that's quite a big spread, as we say, quite a big variation in the position of that low for midnight Saturday and into Sunday. The colours represent the intensity of the low, and they're all pretty similar colours. So again, the low pressure system is going to be somewhere in this zone. We know it's going to be there. We know how intense it's going to be, roughly speaking, but the position of it will be crucial as to how much rain we see in Western Scotland and exactly how strong those winds are. So that's an area we need to really iron out over the next couple of days. At the moment, again, due to that interaction with the jet stream in the next couple of days, will determine the position of the low for the weekend. Beyond that, well, the jet stream kind of gets pushed into this zonal pattern, as I say, coming more of a straight line across the Atlantic for the next few days through the weekend, and even into the early part of next week. It is going to be directly over our heads. But one thing you can also see is that the oranges, the intensity of the jet stream, which is quite strong for the time of year over the next few days, does start to weaken. So the jet stream into next week, perhaps just easing off a little bit, not as intense. And what that means is that our weather patterns are likely to kind of slow down a little bit, and that low pressure system to the north of the UK will in one form or other likely stick around and continue to control our weather. So we are likely to see low pressure more dominant through next week, as this chart shows. This is the probabilistic pressure trend dates going forward along the top there, previous model runs down the side here. Red is high pressure, blue is low pressure. And you can see here through much of next week, most of it is blue, suggesting that low pressure is the most likely dominant feature of our weather through next week. And that means more showers and breezier conditions as well. And this shows very clearly that westerly winds are going to dominate as well. This is showing, when you break it down, not just which pressure pattern is most likely, but whether our winds are going to be coming from the east or the west. Blue is westerly winds, and you can see right throughout next week that is the most likely dominant wind direction, with red being easterly. Not even a whiff of it on the chart there. So yes, we're pretty sure that westerly winds will be dominating, and fairly sure that low pressure will be nearby as well. But the exact flavour of our weather, well, that is difficult to pin down at this stage. This shows the different regimes. You break up the weather into 8 different flavours, if you like, and each representing up to 100% there, the different colours representing the 8 of the different regimes. Now, quite a strong signal for this dark blue colour, this positive NAO, this more changeable weather to control our weather for much of next week. But by the time we get to the back end of next week, each of those different 8 possible flavours is represented, suggesting there that there is more uncertainty towards the back end of next week in particular. And it's going to be hard to pin down details of the weather from the start of next week onwards in particular. But there is one or two things that we can perhaps pick out. I'm going to show you a similar chart now to what we just showed you, but instead of looking at whether the winds are easterly or westerly, this one is now highlighting whether winds are more likely to be northerly or southerly. And again, dates going along the top here. Green means there's no strong signal between northerly or southerly, but there is just a suggestion there towards the back end of next week. It's not a strong signal, it's quite pinky rather than dark red, but a signal there that perhaps will start to introduce more of a southerly to our winds, and perhaps that means that the jets could get buckled again and we'll see more warmer weather perhaps returning to the UK. But it's a pretty weak signal. It's right at the end of the 10-day period we're looking at as well. Just something that we'll be keeping an eye on, and that is what the 10-day trend is all about, of course, just giving you suggestions of things that could happen and things we'll be keeping an eye on. This is the temperature trend for the 4 capitals of the nations across the UK, for Edinburgh and Belfast here. And this, again, is showing that what we saw earlier, temperatures for the next few days are likely to be pretty close to average, with more of a variation in the nighttime temperatures, the purples here. But just a suggestion, particularly in London and Cardiff, towards the end of next week, that there is a little bit of an uptick there, and perhaps those temperatures might start to rise. But again, it is just a hint at this stage. What we do know about next week is that westerly winds are likely to dominate, which means there'll be showers around with low pressure nearby, but it also means there'll be driest weather in the east with more frequent showers in the west. Temperatures, as we've discussed, are going to be close to average by day. There'll be more of a nighttime variability, and just a hint at this stage of maybe something a bit warmer later next week. For more on that, well, the obvious thing is to stay tuned. So if you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe along with like, and of course make sure you're following us for the latest details day on day right across social media.